Hi, my name's Justin Johnson.
And I'm Josiah Stowe.
And we are Dominion Wealth Strategists. We are created to put money in the hands of those that are sitting in the pews.
From budgeting to estate planning, savings accounts, retirement planning, life insurance, and a heck of a lot more here at Dominion.
That means that you are leaving an inheritance that passes multiple generations because that is the legacy. It's part of our mission.
All of Christ for all of life.
And all of finance for Christendom.
From diapers to dating, raising godly children. Let's get into it. Exploring theology, doctrine, and all of the fascinating subjects in between, broadcasting from an undisclosed location, Dead Men Walking starts
now.
Well, hello. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Dead Men Walking Podcast. I'm your host, Greg Moore. You can find out more about us at dmwpodcast.com. Yeah, family episode today. Just me, no guest. You got me for about 30 minutes, and I am trying to stay cool. It has been, as of this recording, yesterday, I think we had 105 here in Michigan in the Midwest. The heat wave is in full effect. And no air conditioning in my studio. I do have heat, but we got a couple fans going. Hopefully you guys can't hear those, but just trying to stay cool. Been in some friends' pools for the last couple days. But it's been good. I would prefer to be hot than cold. I love summer. I love camping. I really like summer food, which I've been eating some good summer food the last couple days. You give me a pasta salad and it's hard to turn it away in the summer. But before we get into it, I got to talk to you about Dominion Wealth Planning. Dominion Wealth Planning, guys. Great sponsors. It's the only distinctly reformed financial company that you need to know, trust, and use. They're a full-service financial and wealth planning company for your personal, business, and church finances. Ooh, what was that? Right in the middle of the live read. We are called to be good stewards with what God has blessed us with and to take dominion over our finances. Let's place our money with Christians, not degenerates, guys. Okay. Dominion Wealth Planning can assist you with budgeting, debt management, savings, life and health insurance, retirement planning, estate planning, and business services. All of Christ for all of life, all of finance for all of Christendom is their motto. So you'll be in good hands when you reach out to them. Book a meeting today at www.reform.money or just click on the link in the description here below if you're watching or listening. From baptism to burial, Dominion has you covered, guys. Make sure you support those guys. Love what Justin and Josiah are doing over there and their team of professionals. We need to get smart about finances, and if you are getting smart about finances, do it with two smart guys who are also believers and who are going to use biblical principle to help you with your finances and money. Cool. Now that we got the business out of the way, love those guys. Thanks for sponsoring the show. Like I said, you got just me today. It's going to be a little all over the place. I'm recording this the day before it releases, so we're going to record and then edit and then throw it up there. Usually I stack my episodes, maybe week 2 are out. Let me take a sip of this Coke Zero. But the last couple of weeks, I've been busy in real estate. Spring, summer is some of my busiest times. Getting ready for some conferences. You start doing, camping trips and getting into the summer swing of things. And that once a week episode sneaks up on you. And yesterday I was thinking, I gotta lay something down. Didn't have a guest this week, which is fine. Originally this podcast was started to have both me and Jason Hamlin, and then we were just gonna have a guest once in a while. And then when he moved away and decided to go a different direction, it was just me for a little bit. But even then, I didn't really feel comfortable just talking into a camera. I feel like sometimes people don't want to just hear me talk. We want to have interesting guests on and have them talk. And I do better when I'm with someone. I'm a type A introvert, conversation. Like, I like to bounce ideas off people. They say something, gives me an idea to say something. And that's kind of how I've ran the podcast for the last 4 years. The podcast's been around for 5, but for the last 4, it's been almost a guest every week. Maybe 6 or 7 episodes out of the 300 have just me talking. But today you got the family episode. It's just me. And I want to talk about something that I don't know if a lot of Christians talk enough about, or it's just a subject where we just assume that a good Christian husband and wife, mother and father should just kind of know. But, I had the realization probably when my kids were like 5 or 6, I just had this thought and I went, oh, wow. All parents in the history of parents are being parents for the first time, you know? Now, outside of grandparents, right? That's kind of their second run. And we all know the grandparent story. They get away with everything with the grandparents. I was raised very strict and, could say certain things and couldn't say certain things and do certain things. And then, boy, you have kids and then the grandparents, your parents just kind of forget all that. And they spoil them rotten, fill them full of sugar and send them back to you. That's how it seems to be for most grandparents when I talk to people my age. But I had that realization that, wow, everyone's just kind of being a parent for the first time and you're just kind of working your way through it. And it starts to give you grace for your parents when you become a parent because you say, oh, these are some hard decisions that my parents had to make. And you might not have agreed with them when you were at that time when you were a child or maybe a young adult. But then as you get a little bit older, you go, okay, I see what was going on here. I have to give them some grace, right? And what I've noticed is that, especially within Christian circles, there isn't a whole lot of parenting advice. It's like, yeah, the major things, right? Like keep them off drugs, premarital sex, like, maybe teach them about the LGBTQ stuff a little bit and, stay away from it or whatever. And it's like, I don't want to be crass here, but there's an old Chris Rock bit where he says, a father's job is just to keep his daughter off the pole, meaning like that she doesn't become a stripper. And you're like, that's how some Christians like approach parenting. Like, as long as my kid grows up, has a decent job, not a crackhead, I've been successful. And as young parents, my wife and I talked, and we really wanted to have a different approach to that. We wanted to make sure we were building a foundation from a very young age, a Christ-centered foundation, teach them about real world issues, teach them to critically think, teach them to not only respect authority, but also challenge it when it needs to be, right? All those type of things. And if you can't tell, this is going to be an episode about parenting from diapers to dating. And what brought this on is, I have 3 children. We homeschool all 3 of them. By God's grace, not one of them has set foot in a government school, and hopefully they won't. My oldest will be a junior this year, senior next year. So I have a 15 and 13 and 11-year-old. The 15 and 13-year-old is going to be 16 and 14 in just a few months here. So I have moved out of the diaper stage, the toddler stage, and really into the teen and preteen stages, right? And with that comes the hormones of attraction and teenage puppy love and all those things that I would say are natural and God-given, but also need to be directed. Correct. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I kind of wanted to spend just a few minutes on where my wife and I were when our children were younger, and then move into kind of the dating issues. And look at, you may agree with what I'm going to say. You may disagree with what I say. I'm just going to kind of tell you how we've done things and maybe give you some best practices and some ideas. And you may walk away from this episode and go, Greg's a complete nut. I would never do that. Or some of you might go, that's very interesting. I might pick that up or do that, or man, I never thought of it that way. But I will tell you, I'm a pretty direct person. And when I have a conviction, I talk very strongly about it. I think that's probably one of my strong suits in being able, I don't want to say to convince, but I have a very strongly held conviction about something. I will tell you exactly how I feel, the facts about it. And really, once I've mulled an idea over for a while, I don't make quick decisions, but once I do make a decision, I'm sticking by it. And I think I can defend it pretty well. So I might say some things, if you're listening right now, warning, to where I will say something that's very blunt, and that might sound offensive to you. Not offensive, but almost like judging. You know what I mean? Oh, thou shalt not judge. And you go, well, wait a minute, I do that. Why is he saying it like that? I'm just telling you how I feel. If you can convince me from the Bible or convince me somewhere that it's better to do it another way, I might consider it, but I haven't found anyone to convince me. So therefore, that's why we're doing things this way. And one of those being homeschool. I haven't found any argument that holds any biblical water, any logical water. I've heard them all. Oh, they've got to be more social and have friends. Stop. My kids have friends. You can have friends outside of going to public school. Oh, we're sending them there to be a witness. No, stop. Yeah, I need management experience. So I'm going to go get a job at a strip club, honey. I'm going to manage a strip club. Is that okay? No, you would say, why are you putting yourself in that situation? And then to put a young person in that situation where you're indoctrinated by Rome for 10 hours a day, more than that, for 13 years out of their life, and then go, oh no, they're being a witness. You can be a witness when you go to the store, when you're walking down the street. Stop. Anyway, that's just one example of, like, I've heard the arguments and none of them hold water. I've found, and here's one of those statements you're not going to like, most parents who send their kids to school do it out of some sort of selfishness, whether it's career, whether it's time, whether it's money, whatever it is, underlying, they've went, I need my kids away from me for 8 hours a day. It benefits me in some way. I know that sounds harsh, but I don't know if I found anyone that I've talked to that even past homeschoolers and then switched to public school had done that. Oh, well, she wanted to play sports, or he wanted to play sports, right? Like, well, that's a selfish thing, and we can get into that. But this isn't what the episode's about. I'm getting off track here, and this is why I usually have guests, because they help keep me on track. But with us, and I've talked about it before on the podcast, from a very young age, my wife and I decided that we were going to be very open and honest with our children about everything. Now, obviously, age appropriate, right? We're not sitting down a 4-year-old and talking about LGBTQ issues, right? But at the same time, age appropriate, all subjects were on the table. Nothing was off limits if they asked or had a question. And we would explain it in the age appropriate way when they had that. When they got older, maybe explain it a little further into detail. But from a very young age, our children knew, names of private parts, what their functions were. We talked about trans issues and LGBTQ issues from a very young age, what the Bible says about that, how that worldview affects your life, and how it's in rebellion to God, and all those things. And I think we did it in a way that was respectful. I don't want you to think we were kind of, I took that Steven Anderson fundamentalist view, geez, I don't even like saying the word, but like how he does, he'll get right up in the pulpit and say fag haters and all these things. And, he hates fags. And no, it wasn't that. It was, we have compassion for those who are in rebellion to God. God had compassion on us when we were yet his enemy. I think we should treat those people and share the gospel with them and let them know that, yes, they are depraved, just like I am. They are sinners, and they need a holy and righteous and just God to save them, and profess with their mouth, believe with their heart, right? So, but anyway, from a very young age, we found it very helpful to be open about all those things. So that way, when my kids did run into the neighborhood kids and kids that they were maybe going to church with who weren't homeschooled, or who might have information that they picked up from their friends in a public school or even a private school, that they were prepared to not only know what it was, but to make a biblical and logical, sometimes constitutional argument for or against it, right? And that's one of the benefits, I believe, of homeschooling is you can get, 2 to 3 hours of one-on-one with your child, with your student, is equivalent to a week's worth of education in a public school. I'm thoroughly convinced of that, having gone to public school my junior and senior year, having talked to kids who've gone to public school and they're open about it. So that was very beneficial to be able to sit them down, talk about those things. Now, with that being said, we talked about, man and a woman, procreation, like when you come of that age, you'll have these feelings. And we're now getting to the point to where my wife and I having those talks years ago, we're getting to the point of like, they're becoming in reality. When you have an almost 16, almost 14-year-old and even 11-year-old, they're getting to that point to where they're starting to notice people, and they're, there's friend groups, and there's maybe I like this person, or I'm attracted to that person, or things like that. But I think getting out in the open, talking about it up front, is Is one of the biggest benefits. And I have to give my wife so much credit here because she was very, so good at that. So good at taking a very, a subject that most kids would be embarrassed about, or maybe not want to talk to their parents about, and just talking about it so naturally that it feels like you're just having a conversation. Um, and we really did kind of attack it jointly to where I would kind of have the talking points and what we want to cover. She would kind of be the delivery. I would add in a little bit, we're both there. But it was such a blessing. But now you get to the age to where, yeah, you're 14, 15, 16, 17, you are getting those feelings. And one things we taught our kids too is it's absolutely a natural feeling. And in fact, not as only is it natural, but it's godly and it's good. God spoke and commanded and said, go forth and multiply. Now, when he said that, I truly believe when God speaks, when he says something, it changes the reality in which we live. It changes the natural order. It affects nature as we know it. And I believe those genetic markers, if you will, or those hormonal things that we get at that age are God given. That is part of procreation. That is part of humans procreating, and that attraction and that drive and all those things. Our job as parents is to make sure that we are guiding those correctly, that we're harnessing them properly, that we're teaching, that we're discipling, that we're saying, well, what is it that you're truly feeling, and what is good about that? How could that be misused? Those feelings, things like that, right? And you know, to me, it's one of those things where I see when God speaks and changes the actual way the natural world works. I'm a true believer in that. I also believe when God opened up the heavens for the flood for Noah, and then he said, when you see that rainbow, remember my promise. They hadn't seen a whole lot of rainbows before the flood. It was a greenhouse type system within the earth. Did not rain very often. It was very humid out. Think like Amazon rainforest type stuff, where there's a lot of water in the air, a lot of greenery. And when God flooded the earth, he actually changed the ecosystem of how evaporation works, and the clouds collected, and then rain comes down, and that cycle. And he said, now that it's going to be raining a lot because I've changed the way the natural order works, the clouds and the evaporation and the raining system, you're going to see those rainbows up there a lot more often, because you're going to see refracted light in the sky because of the water droplets. When you see that, when you see the way that nature is working, remember that's a promise that I'll never do this again. I'll never step down into humanity and change the created natural ecosystem. That's how I read that. And it's very powerful when you think of it that way. A lot of people think, oh, a rainbow, isn't that pretty? When you see that pretty rainbow, God promised it. He said, no, it was a very drastic thing I had to do. The world is going to work differently now. Waters from the deep came up, waters from the top came down. We're just now finding out scientifically that there's more water underneath the oceans than there are in the oceans. And that's where they think most of the oceans came from, up from the bottom. Lo and behold, science catching up with the Bible again. But I read that and I say, so when God speaks, when he does something and changes the reality in which we live, it's very important. And I do like the idea of like the, some theologians believe this, some kind of throw it to the side. But for me, like Yahweh, God's personal name, his most, it'd be like calling me Greg, right? My first name. You're on a first name basis with God. Well, Yahweh, when abbreviated, is YHWH, like Yahweh, right? A lot of theologians say that even that is mimicking the act of breathing. The Yah is the breath in, and Hui is the way it's spelled almost shows or mimics you breathing. And it's supposed to remind you that even the breath in which you take is based on God giving it to you. And God, the same way, when he breathes life into us, when he speaks, things change, right? So there's this whole dynamic in comparison of like speaking and breathing with God and then speaking and breathing with us. And I don't know, I just find that fascinating. I haven't fully worked it out, but I almost see that when the Bible says, and God spoke, Isaiah says his word doesn't return to him void or without chaos is the translation there. So when God does something, he's very purposeful when he speaks. It goes out, it accomplishes its goal, comes back to him without chaos, without void, with order. And God speaking, "Go forth and multiply." He did it, and it came back to him without chaos or void, and it's accomplishing exactly what it should. Now, we have a lot of culture battles to fight when it comes to dating and moving out and getting married and all those type of things. And I'll just say I'm in a church that really encourages that children are a blessing from God. We have very large families in our church, very many children. We have a young church with a lot of married couples in their 20s and early 30s with many, many children. We have so often a lot of our youth kind of graduating and either going to college or not, but that kind of pre-college to college age, and they're usually married by then and starting families. So we start pretty young. And I love all that. But there are some things in the culture that we have to fight when we kind of promote that, right? Like, let's not forget, I've said it before, that the secular culture says, look, at when you move 18, when you're 18 years old, you're an adult, move out, get an apartment, have some fun, have some friends over. And I really think that's a psyop from the government. Like, let's break up the nuclear family, get one family paying 2 rents, 2, grocery bills, 2 sets of utility bills. Like, when someone's 18 and moves out, that's insane to me. Like, if you look through the history of humanity, the extended family was the norm, the extended nuclear family. Excuse me. Let me get a little drink here. It hasn't been since maybe 50, 60 years ago where we've really seen a push to get the young kids out from underneath the parents and on their own, in their own living space and things like that. And it's actual insanity if you think about it. And especially with inflation and the cost of living and all those things here in 2025. I mean, it is just absolutely ridiculous. And when I look back and when I see the Bible, and this goes back to when your children are starting to date or court or see someone they take an interest in, I really believe that, if you, and this is one of the statements I'm gonna make that's harsh. If your children are young, let's say they move out, get married at like 18, 19, get married, their husband and wife, living in an apartment, having children, immediately go on WIC or some type of welfare and go, well, it's social assistance. They need help. They're young. I think you failed as a parent. That's just how I feel. You have failed. You have not properly prepared your child for life and how to take care of themselves and support themselves, whether the male or the female. Look, at the male is going to provide and going to have the job, but the female, Proverbs 31 wife is very crafty and very business oriented and can be. My wife, in her heyday of her Etsy shop, was doing very well, and she did it on the side of being a mother of 3 and homeschooling full time, and all the extracurriculars that go with that, and still found time to run a successful Etsy shop and bring an income for the family. Even though it is primarily my job to provide biblically. But my point being is, as my wife and I were joking, even this morning, about how we joke, like, we can understand arranged marriages a little bit. Like, we get it. I mean, you look back biblically and even the patriarchs, you know what I mean? There was, like, from a young age, like, I'm going to marry that person. You're going to marry that person. We're going to come together at the right age. And the families started working together. Like, okay, it looks like we're going to have, be business partners. You get to graze over there, but I want you to trade my, honey, or whatever it was, but they had their eyes set on a goal, and it was years and years and years. Now, they might've got married young, 14, 15, 16, but from a very young age, they said, okay, these two are going to be married. We start working towards setting up their future to carry on our legacy, support them, whether it be in business or beliefs or values. But it was a very, it was a very foundational building experience. And I'm not advocating for arranged marriages. I'm saying now in today's culture, it can go from, your child is 16 and kind of likes someone with puppy love, to 18 or 19, just a short 2 or 3 years later, they're getting married. And they're trying to struggle kind of on their own. And I'm not against young couples kind of going through some things and learning some stuff, but as godly parents, we should be helping them set the foundation and even set them up for successes in their young marriage and young parenthood, right? Like that falls on us parents to do that. So that means if you do have a young child, I say young, young adult, teenager, and they're looking at, okay, I'm interested in this person. I mean, you should be getting to know their family. You should be talking about finances and goals and professions and values right up top. All those things need to line up and kind of be laid out on the table, so to speak, before there's any pursuit by either the man or, the young man or the young woman. And I truly believe that. I mean, going back to my further point too, like, Jacob worked for Laban, like for 14 years, 7 years and then 7 more. And like, he was an integral part of like that family before he was able to marry. And you just go, we've lost that. We've totally lost that. Sometimes the families are meeting for the first or second time at the wedding, right? Like it's this weird thing where you're blending two families together and there's no foundation. Just like there should be a foundation with young children on the ways of God and the ways of the world and be knowledgeable about that. There should be a foundation in the courting process as well, too. And setting boundaries and, like I said, sharing values. I just find it absolutely amazing when I have parents, and I don't think it's any parent in my church, but some of my secular friends or others that just kind of go, I can hardly wait for them to move out at 18. And yeah, they're going to have to find their way just like I did. And you go, how unloving is that? Like, I'm not saying coddle your child and hold their hand every step of the way, but you better believe my daughters and my son, they are hard workers. They're smart. They know the value of a dollar. They critically think. And I'll do everything in my power to help them with professions and jobs and purchasing homes and raising a family and all those things. That is my job as a parent. It never ends. It changes when they move out and they have their own family. And I understand that. But, and I'm not talking about nepotism here, but yeah, you absolutely better believe as a county commissioner and a real estate broker in the community. And if I have any influence in certain job positions or anything, I'm going to suggest my children for those. And I'm going to say, you need to look at take a good hard look. Now, the double-edged sword of that is my children will know Dad referred me. So I better do twice as well as the other applicants if I get this job or position or career. Because, I hold my children to a high standard and they know that. And for the most part, they've met that high standard in love, right? But I think we should have standards for our kids. We just don't shrug things off and say, oh, well, kids will be kids, boys will be boys. Oh, that's what girls do. No. Yeah, we have a flesh and we have a depraved, sinful nature. And we fight against that. In fact, that's what Proverbs talks about when it says, train up a child in the way that they want to go, right? We've talked about this before on the podcast. I hate when that proverb is interpreted as like a salvific promise. If you teach them about Jesus when they're little, they'll never be apostate. They'll never fall away. Well, that's not true. We know kids that grew up in the church and had a head understanding of God and deconstructed and fell away and want nothing to do with God and raised their fist. What that proverb is actually saying is, if you train up a child in the natural way that they want to go, in selfishness and spoiledness and depravity and in sin, and they naturally want to be mean or selfish or greedy or I want what I want. If you train a child up that way and just let them have whatever they want, when they're an adult, they're not going to depart from that. They will not easily depart from that. That is the foundation you've set for them. So it's actually almost like a reverse promise. It's almost a warning, which most Proverbs are. Even a lot of the promises that people think are in Proverbs are actually just warnings. So we have a very wise man warning us that, no, you don't let a child go to their natural tendencies in everything. We do it very well. Most of us do when they're children, when they're toddlers, and they walk up to another toddler and and rip the toy out of their hand, and we say, no, 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 you got to give that back. It's not your turn. Sharing, right? We're great at that when they're 3, but somehow it feels like a lot of parents fall off when it's 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, into those teen years where they're becoming young adults. I'll admit that becomes a little tougher because now, you just don't have supreme ultimate authority like you do over a 2-year-old. They can talk back and have a discussion, and this is what I really want. But I find it interesting that we kind of go, well, when girls get in a group when they're 13, they're all just going to talk about each other, and that's kind of what they do, and it's drama, and it is what it is. And you go, well, hold on. I've taught my daughters to not partake in that, to not do that, right? To stand up biblically and say, we absolutely don't talk about someone behind their back or make fun of them, or whatever the case may be. But I found that parents kind of take a step back, and those are the critical years, especially in the dating years, when we should really be involved. And I'm not talking about helicopter parenting. And look at, guys, if you've known anything about me on this podcast, you'll know that I'm always qualifying myself because I say things very quickly, very direct. And in my head, I know what I'm saying. And I get people that constantly, my whole entire life, yeah, but is this what you really meant? So I'm always qualifying, right? I'm not a helicopter parent, but you better be involved when you have children that are interested in the opposite sex, right? And that are pursuing or being pursued, correct? By the opposite sex. And I think it's very important that the same ideas that we have when they're young, and we say we want to just saturate them in the Word of God and His principles and morals and values and all those things, and be open and talk about those things. We need to bring that into teenhood and into the dating and courting realm. And most parents, I think, don't do it because it's uncomfortable for the parents, right? It's very uncomfortable. And for those of you out there, and leave me a message, man, you can click on the link below and shoot, click text, send us a text. That's the easiest way to get a hold of me. Sends it right to a certain inbox. But give me your opinion on that. I mean, those of you out there who have the 13, 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds and are going through it now. Those of you who have the 25-year-olds, 30-year-olds that are moved out and have started a family, do me a favor and send me some of your best practices and what that was like when you were going through that. And I'll share them and maybe even do a follow-up episode about it, because I want to encourage those that might be coming up on that. This is where I'm at in my time with 16, 14, and 11, right? Had this podcast been going 10 years ago, I'd be talking to you about the toddler years and what I'm going through now. If it's 10 years from now, I'll be talking to you about my kids being out of the house, married, and having a wonderful family, and what it's like being a grandparent, right? So it's like, this is where I'm at in my life, and I want to talk to you about it. So I want to encourage those that are coming up into that, and maybe even those that are also going through it with some of my best practices and being open. But I really do believe that we have to make sure we remove ourselves as parents and understand that, one, when you're a teenager, you have a lot of emotions that you think are really, really important and real, when in fact they're hormones, right? I think my wife called it puppy love, and I don't even like that term, but I laughed at it. I said, yeah, no, I get it. I remember when I was 14 and I was like, oh my gosh, this girl's beautiful. I'm going to love her forever. And, 6 months later, she moved away and I couldn't remember her name. It's like, it's so intense. We have to remember that kind of biochemical reaction that's happening when you're a teenager, but we're supposed to guide it as parents. We're supposed to come alongside and disciple and be parents and point back to the Bible about what the Bible says about those things. But also understand that it is a serious thing, yet we have to have discernment in that. Is this just a little summer crush that there's emotions going on? Or is this something where, and this is where you're open and you sit your children down. If it seems like something serious, then we start building a foundation for your life with that person in the future, which means we discuss with the other with the family of the other opposite sex. What's the profession going to look like? What's your values on what the female role is, the male role, right? Like all those very important things. I'm very big on sitting down and talking face to face about that. not only blesses the child into their adulthood and blesses their marriage and their family, it is going to immensely bless you and the relationship you have with those other parents of the person that your son or daughter is courting or dating. Like getting all that out in the open and finding that out, it's such a, I don't know, it just gets everything out, and it's such a freeing thing, and which we plan to do with our children, and I hope you do too. But yeah, I don't want to ramble too much here, guys. I think, geez, we're already at probably about 30 minutes here. I told you it wasn't going to be too long, but what I really wanted out of this episode was work some stuff out in my head, talking about, not only the diaper years, but also the dating years. But also, if you guys have any best practices, like shoot me a text or send us an email from dmwpodcast.com and tell me the age of your kids and like where you're at in the stage and best practices or things to avoid too, because I'd love to do a follow-up episode with some of you, who write in or call in or send a text or whatever, and just say, this is kind of where the listeners are at. And I look at my management style when I worked for a Fortune 500 company was consensus style management. Like I'd get the consensus of everyone, kind of the input. I would make the final decision, but man, Proverbs is so right. A wise king has many counselors, meaning they're listening to all types of advice. Now it's up to them to have discernment and make the correct choice and weigh it against the word of God and all those things. But having a lot, if you're able to do it, some people get overwhelmed by a lot of input. Not me. I'll take your input. I think about it. I roll it around in my brain. I compare it to the word. I think about how that's going to work logistically in the world, will fit for my situation. And it either gets tossed out completely, incorporated completely, or some type of hybrid. And I think that's pretty consistent with parenting, how it should be. There are going to be some opinions and best practices that are horrible for you and your family. There are going to be some that you will pick up and they're great. And you go, wow, I can't believe I had never heard of that. And that's been working wonders for my children and my family. And then there's going to be some where maybe you do a hybrid. I like that. I don't necessarily like that. This is what seems to be best biblically and for our family. So if you guys send those in, I would be more than happy to share them. And I think it'd be interesting for everyone listening too, to kind of share those personal stories. But I'm going to get off of here, guys. I'm already sweating. I got a fan going. I'm not sweating, actually. I'm just getting a little warm, but got a big day. Just so you guys know too, very quickly, I'm going to give you a conference update. Tentatively at the Blue Collar Conference with Michael Foster in Cincinnati, end of August. Roadmap to Revival with Jeffrey Rice and James White down in Tullahoma, Tennessee, end of September. And then Fight, Laugh, Feast in Tennessee, end of October. So I've got 3 coming up right at the kind of end of summer going into fall. We're going to be giving you live coverage on all of those as well too. And I think one of those I'm hosting. So it'll be fun. We'll bring you coverage. And the Fight, Laugh, Feast is going to be fun because I might be traveling down there with another podcaster, someone you guys know who's been on before. I don't want to release too much. I'm going to tease you a little bit, but I think we're going to be doing some vlogging and some road trip stuff. So we will be in the truck, possibly with a camper in tow, going to a campsite, going down to Tennessee for Fight, Laugh, Feast, and we're going to be documenting it. It's all in the works right now. We're going to see how it works out, but I'll let you know who that other podcaster is, and that's going to be a fun time for the October Fight, Laugh, Feast. But all right, we got the business handled at the top of the show, bottom of the show. Thanks, guys, so much for listening. Hopefully what I said didn't offend you. And if it did, maybe introspect, look inward. Why did that offend me? Was it something I was saying that was true that affected you? I don't know. That's the way I look at it. When something offends me, it's usually my flesh. And then I go, why was my flesh offended by that? Oh, probably because it was godly. And my flesh doesn't like anything that's Christ-like. So, guys, remember, the chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. God bless. Be sure to check us out at dmwpodcast.com, where you can purchase the best and snarkiest merch on the internet, support the show, and leave us a review or message. Dead Men Walking can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Dead Men Walking Podcast, and on Twitter X at Real DMW Podcast. The Dead Men Walking Podcast is part of the Fight, Laugh, Feast Network. For exclusive show content, be sure to download the PubTV app and become a member. If you're a business that needs to reach hundreds of thousands of potential customers in your demographic, podcast advertising might be for you. Send all inquiries to deadmenwalkingpodcast@gmail.com.
None your biscuits.